Hi.
Hey, everybody.
So we're talking about giving up on the idea that one of you is wrong. And I know that a lot of you are reading this going, or reading the email going, no way, because he or she is definitely wrong.
And
so,
you guys are wrong about it.
and I get that. I totally understand that. I know what it's like to build a really good argument and be right. And that's that, right? But if we follow that path, and it's just been decided, it's official, your partner is wrong, there's only two choices from there going forward. And one is that you leave them, and the other is that you change them through some sort of like threat or guilt or shame
or try to.
or try to. That's important. Just try to. This doesn't mean that they will. And both of those paths are obviously really disconnected. And you're taking this course because you want to feel more connection. So we're going to rule that out. This idea is that they aren't wrong, that no one is wrong.
And we know that's a huge leap. We know that we've been, like, our culture trains us day after day after day to only think in terms of getting it right and avoiding getting it wrong. But it's still not in service of connection.
So even if it doesn't sound like something you can do, just sit with the idea that that is an idea that exists and see where that gets you.
And as we mentioned already, that doesn't mean that you don't still have preferences and you don't still express what you would prefer to have happen and talk about what you like and don't like. It's just putting it in terms of owning that as a preference and not as like some measurement of someone's absolute rightness or wrongness in terms of that subject.
So we have an example that's kind of a tender one for us because it involves my mom, and moms are important to us, right? There's a lot of feelings around moms. So let's just understand that this topic just by itself was going to be loaded. But there was a point a while ago where my mom was upset, and she decided it was because of Nathan and how he was being around her. And she told me about it, right? Didn't talk to him about it, but she told me about it. And then, of course, I was really upset because I don't want my mom to be upset. And so I took that on and decided, yes, you're wrong. Obviously you're wrong because she's upset and I'm upset. So both of us are upset. That means you're definitely wrong.
And part of it was because you were worried about this already, and then there was some information you got from her that seemed to corroborate what you were worried about.
We were now in agreement.
Right.
Yeah. And so I decided...
There were two of you deciding that this was right and the other way was wrong.
Yeah, and I decided that you needed to be different or else.
Yeah.
And you needed to be different or else I would either lose my relationship with my mom or I would lose my relationship with you. And neither of those were palatable at all for me. So you had to be different.
And you said as much.
Yes.
that what was at stake was not getting to be with your family as much as you wanted, or not getting to be together in the way that we have.
Right. And you weren't like, oh, okay.
Right. I was like, nuh-uh, you're wrong, because I've just been being who I am, and if that's not acceptable to you, then what are we doing here anyway?
Right, and the more defensive you got, you went from defensive to, you know what, I think I'm not wrong, and you guys are wrong.
Yeah. And I had a really good argument for why it was really all your mom's stuff that was both what you were sensitive about and what she was struggling with, and how it wasn't really me at all.
Yeah, and the more you went in that direction, the more I saw my goal of getting to be either with you and also with my family getting further and further away. And I got more and more desperate.
Yeah,
so I was doubling down. No, you're wrong and you need to be different.
And if you can't see that, then there's a big problem.
Yeah. And we did that for a while.
Yeah, painfully long while.
Way longer than was comfortable. And I'm not sure how we realized, but probably we realized that we just kept coming to that dead end, right? The one that we already mentioned, which is either make you change, and I couldn't make you change.
Well, and if I did, then there was a sense of having lost being acceptable to you for who I am and how I am, warts and all, so to speak.
Right. So what would our partnership be
Yeah,
after that?
me just trying to please you or appease them in order to please you.
Or we break up.
Mm-hmm.
And we just kept coming to that dead end again and again and again and thrashing about in that discomfort. A lot of crying, a lot of fighting, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And
in a way that we haven't usually ever.
yeah.
The pressure was so high and the feelings were so raw around it.
Yeah.
And of course it hit triggers for your mom, and it hit triggers for you, it hit triggers for me, and they were just all, it was like a trigger party.
And I basically had to like crash into that brick wall enough times to be desperate enough to look for some other option. And
Right.
what we came to as the option was what we know, right? The stuff that we're talking about with you guys. Well, we were able to finally grab a tiny bit of that and remember, oh, okay, we can be next to each other. We can touch. We can pause and do the feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And we can live into this idea that maybe you're not wrong. And maybe I'm not wrong either. Maybe we both have preferences for how we'd like this to go. And mixed in with those preferences are all of these feelings.
Mm-hmm.
They're strong preferences.
Yes.
They are
Bedrock
incredibly
preferences.
strong.
Yeah.
But as soon as it became a strong preference of mine and not a you better or else, you had much more lean in.
Mm-hmm.
You care about me. You want what I want. And if I can have it without you being kicked out,
Mm-hmm.
you're all for it. So there was that shift where we realized we weren't on opposing sides, but we had to get rid of that idea that one of us was wrong in order to live into that reality that we actually want the same things. We want connection. We want me to feel good around my family. We want you to feel good around my family.
Mm-hmm.
We actually have a shared goal there, but we couldn't see it because we were really, really busy making sure that the other one was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Because I thought you needed to be wrong in order for me to get my needs met.
And to preserve your relationship with your mom.
Right, which
And-
people would do anything for.
Yeah. And I thought you had to be wrong so that I could still be who I am and preserve my relationship with you.
Right. It was a big deal. And when I say we paused and did feelings, it wasn't like there was an afternoon where we paused and had our feelings. This was a weeks-long process.
Yeah, and aside from being embroiled in the discussion and banging our heads against it, I was doing research about like how to talk better about it, and like going back to our nonviolent communication roots and trying to find out more about how to look at it and how to talk about it and how to be with each other around it. And it was actually Marshall Rosenberg's, who's in the NVC hierarchy. Who presented us with the idea of no one is wrong.
And it's what shifted everything.
It really is.
Because if we didn't have that piece, I would still be busy building my case and actually rallying more people to agree with me so that my case looked bigger and better to try to force you to be different. But once we got that, we were able to let it go. And those are the two things I wanted to mention in this, maybe to help you want to buy into this idea. There are two losses involved, and there's positives and negatives to each of them. One is that if no one is wrong, you don't have to be defensive, which I can't tell you how that's changed my life, because there are so many times during the day where I feel defensive because I think you're saying something I've done is wrong, or that whatever it is, household things, little things, whether or not the kids, they're having candy right now, and I'm they are. I said they could because and I'm starting to get defensive about that.
Or the bench at the volleyball game. You chose to sit in a section that was further down from the doorway, and when I came to join you, I had to walk past the gauntlet of other people I didn't know, and I didn't see your face, and so I came with some emotional material and said, "Why did you sit here?"
Yeah, and I was like, well, because this is the side that the players' parents sit on, and I started to get lost in this idea because I'm still, at times, forgetting that I'm not wrong. And when I do that, I get defensive, and the distance between us gets bigger, and I can't connect with you that you felt shy and intimidated to go past all those rabid fans and like find your way and not know where you were going. And I couldn't connect with your feelings about that. I didn't even care what they were because I was too busy being defensive. So giving that up has brought me so much peace, because I can just go straight to connecting with you, and I just skip this whole activity that tortures me. This idea, the inside brain chatter, the jury that's watching me, to whether or not I'm doing things right or wrong. To be free from that for the first time in my life has been huge in our relationship, but in general.
Well, and if you don't go on the defensive, or if one party doesn't go on the defensive, then the other party doesn't feel like they need to go further to prove their point, or like on the offense. And as we've been talking about the rest of the week, if we then stop at that moment instead of defending and then dig into the feelings, then it becomes a moment of connection.
Right. I can welcome you to the bleachers feeling shy and intimidated, and that's no problem. I can be there for you around that. I can totally relate to that. If I'm not busy doing this other thing, defending myself, I'm totally available for that. And then we feel good. The other thing that you have to give up when you pick up this idea is, like calling all of your friends and explaining how your partner is so awful and wrong and they did that thing again. A lot of us, our friendships are built around that. Like, oh my God, yeah, he did it again. Can you believe it? Right? And it feels good. You're like, I've got community. My sister's got my back, you know, girlfriends.
And it is connection.
It is connection. And that's not an option if you've given up the idea that your partner is wrong.
This kind of connection, right?
So there, at first, it's going to feel like, well, then what? I guess I don't have friends anymore because what else do we talk about? And it's not that you don't talk about your partnership. It's how you talk about your partnership. So the narrative switches from, he did it again. What a jerk.
Asshole.
You know, doesn't your husband do that? Oh my God. You know, that's not the narrative anymore. The narrative is maybe you're having feelings about something that's happening between you. And so you talk about that. Like, I'm just feeling really frustrated and overwhelmed. And then you get that support from your friends and family members that way around your feelings rather than teaming up with you against your partner.
And because so many of us live still under the rubric of right and wrong, there may be a lot of times when you start to go in this direction when your friends may come back to the old page and be like, oh yeah, God, what an asshole, how dare he do that, you know, if my husband did that, I'm not, you know, a whole bunch of like ways to mitigate him being wrong, you know, to deal with him being wrong. And you can slowly begin to change that conversation as well by just being upfront, like, well, for me, it's not about right or wrong. You know, I just want it the way that I want it, and he's wanting it that way, and I'm having feelings about that. It doesn't mean that, you know, you can begin to explain your way of looking at it without having to train them to be, you know, no longer thinking in terms of right and wrong.
Because remember this, that if you connect with your sister and your brother and your girlfriends and your parenting mom friends at the school, if you connect by kind of like bitching about your partners, well, think about what that requires. That requires your partner to be in that role, right? You need him or her to be a jerk or to get on your nerves or to do the wrong thing. You need them to be in that role in order to connect with your community. And so you're never going to let that go. You're not going to say, oh, you know, he's actually pretty great, because you wouldn't want to trade all that connection that you're getting around it. And so you kind of lock yourselves into a dynamic that serves you on one hand, but really is hard, you know, in the home and when trying to work on stuff together. So...
Well, and man, just interject here, I think you've even had the experience in the past of coming to the sense or realizing that the people that you go to talk about that kind of stuff with, your sister or your mom or friends or whoever, then start to carry that picture of your partner instead of the full rounded picture that you have of all the things that are working and on a daily basis or a weekly basis. They're just holding on to these handfuls of places where you're saying he's blown it or whatever.
Yeah, and I can't say
that
to them,
becomes their picture.
no, just hold on to that piece long enough for us to really connect, and then, you know, let it go, and then remember that he's actually pretty great as well. They don't, they can't, they won't. And so, yeah, it's about, you have to change the culture in the community where you connect. You can still talk about your partnership, but how you talk about it is important. But it's worth it, because then your partner is freed from that role. They don't have to play it anymore. You don't need them to play it anymore.
And you don't have to lose connection with your community. You just shift it toward connecting around a different piece.
Yeah, a different way of connecting. Yeah. So try that on. At first, I know you're going to balk at this idea, but then remember where that road leads. If they're wrong, what is that brick wall that you're going to crash against? What's your dead end look like? And then just decide if you want to go there or not. We tried it. Oh, it was terrible. So picking up this idea that they're not wrong means these other paths open up. You no longer have to be defensive. You no longer have to have them in this particular role in order to connect with other people. There's a lot that becomes available.
You don't have to disconnect from each other to sort of like prove that they are in fact wrong and they need to get it so that you can then reconnect.
You don't have to live this life of competition of like, oh, yeah, I got that right. Oh, yeah, see, I knew where the restaurant was. Oh, I knew, you know. It changes everything for the better. Maybe you're convinced. Try it on.
Yeah, give it a shot.